Hello everybody, my name's Denis Nagel. I'm a veterinarian with Solvet and Alberta Veterinary Labs, and I'd like to thank the Grey Bruce Farmers Association or the Farmers Week for allowing us to present at your meeting. COVID has created a lot of opportunities and a lot of changes, and normally we wouldn't be able to get to probably do a big presentation like this. And so we're looking at the bright side of the whole thing, and we appreciate it. I am a 1983 graduate of the Western College of Veterinary Medicine. I grew up on a ranch in southern Saskatchewan, and I moved to Alberta right after graduation, and I practiced in Crossfield, where I had a beef practice for 33 years, and I've been with Solvet. I'm just entering my fifth year now. Today I'd like to talk to you about itchy cattle. This has become a bigger problem than it used to be, and I'm just going to go through that. In my capacity as a consulting veterinarian with Solvet and Alberta Vet Labs, I address a lot of the complaints that are coming from producers and veterinarians about cattle itching. So I'll just run you through a bit of a timeline here and about what's going on. So when we started to investigate these, or when Solvet came into being and we started to invest, and we're selling Poron ivermectin, our Solmectin, and our AVL Poron for cattle. In the low season of 2017, which would be January, February, when cattle start to itch, we were getting the complaints started to roll in, and it just kept on building and building. The January prior to that, in 2016, there virtually was nothing. There's, maybe in all of Western Canada we had five complaints, and most of those were application errors. But in 2017, it really started to snowball, and we probably fielded somewhere, hundreds of complaints. So we weren't really sure what was going on. So as we would go out and investigate these itchy cattle, one of the things that we did notice was a lot of them didn't have lice. So, of course, the complaint was that your product didn't work. My cattle have lice, they're still itchy, but you go out and you look at them, and it just doesn't, these cattle are losing hair, but you can't find any lice. So when does that occur? Well, that generally starts in January. And does it happen every year? And this is sort of the timeline I was getting back. Well, no, it really doesn't. So in 2017 and 2018, we had a lot of complaints. We talked to a lot of people. In 2019, that went down to back to 2016 levels. There just wasn't any. And we thought, well, is that because cattle aren't itching, or is that because people have become used to that and they're reapplying and they're not telling anybody? But when I talk to veterinary clinics kind of around Western Canada, they have not sold as much permethrins as they did in 2016 or 2017 and 2018, which would either the producers aren't treating cattle or the problem just isn't as severe. To me, it seems like the problem isn't as severe. So again, we're not really sure how to explain that, but we know that that it certainly wasn't, it doesn't seem to be an ongoing problem. We don't know what's going to happen this year. I just made a prediction, and you can check up with me in April or May to see if it's right. I don't think it's going to be as severe either, and we'll get into that, why I don't think that a little bit later. So what are the things that we see when we go out and look at these cattle? We see some cattle that are just sort of mostly in the feedlot. Sometimes you have them with you get them in for a bloat surgery or something like that, so you got to shave them, and you find that these cattle are just infested with lice, but they're not scratching, and we don't really, we don't know what to make of that. And then we go out and we look at a lot of these cattle, and we can't find any lice on them, but they're losing hair and they're excoriating skin and they are itchy. So that's a bit of a conundrum there. It's certainly not what producers think. They think if you have an itchy cow, that cow has lice. But that's not always the case. So what we have seen when we go out and we investigate these itchy herds is that at least 30% we can't find a single louse on any of the cattle that we look at. On the ones that we do find some lice, it's less than 20% of the animals in the herd that you can actually find lice on. And of those cattle that you actually find lice on, there is very low numbers of lice. Like, you have to look a lot to find a louse. And the interesting thing is when we do find lice, it's always sucking lice. I personally have not seen a biting louse yet. We'll get into the different types of lice a little later on, but that's sort of what we see. When we retreat these cattle, either with ivermectin poron again or permethrin, we don't really see, especially if they're treated in January, we don't really see a reduction in cattle scratching. Sometimes you do. Most of the time, no. There's really no decrease in that. Those cattle just seem to keep scratching. So, why are these cattle itching? I mean, and it's when it's cold out here in Western Canada in February and your cows are bald, it's really a upsetting thing for a producer to see. And generally, a lot of times, we'll get bulls also doing the same thing about the same time, about the end of January and February. Can't find lice on them. Of course, these are sale bulls, and they've got big patches of hair missing. So people are looking for answers. So what are some of the potential causes that could cause itching? Of course, one of them we all think are lice. The other ones would be mange mites. We'll get into that in a little bit. And another one could be straw mites that don't actually live on the animal but live in the straw. They might feed on the animal, but you can't find them on the animal. Vitamin mineral deficiencies are another one. For instance, we know that a vitamin A deficiency will cause dry skin and itching. Seasonal shedding. So normally when the days get longer in March, hair is going to start to fall out. That hair is dead and it's itchy, and cattle rub it out. That is a little bit different in the fact that they usually don't rub hard enough to damage their skin. Environmental hypersensitivities, things like barley hulls, oat hull, straw. If you're feeding with a bale shredder and you're blowing, cattle are running underneath it and getting that. It's just it's the same idea of us doing that. When you get a oat hull down your shirt, it's itchy. Environmental factors. Cattle do get frostbite, and when those top layers of the skin die in a couple of weeks after the frostbite has occurred, that is itchy. Also, dry air leads to dry skin. Cattle get itchy from that. So we'll talk about lice first, because that's the big issue. And why are we why would we see some louse problems? Well, back before 2016, before I started with Solvet, and when I was in practice, we would see lice in cattle, and once we started to ask why, a bit of a history, basically, it was things like not all the animals were treated at the same time, and then the animals were mixed. And here's an example how you'd get that. The poron would go on at preg checking time. We wouldn't treat the opens because they're culls, so the opens would go into a different pen. During the fall run, the price of culls go down, so people decide to keep them until the new year. The culls get mixed back in with the herd, and then you get lice again. Another way to get that is treating in rain or snow, and I mean then the product has to stay on for at least an hour. And if you're running it through snow on the back of an animal, well, it's going to wash off. It's not likely going to get down to where you need it. An introduction of untreated animals. You buy a load of bred heifers. You think that they're treated, but maybe they're not. They go in with the rest of the herd, or go in with the rest of the heifers, and then the heifers, as they calve, go in with the rest of the herd, and that maybe occurs in February, and then you have lice in the rest of them. The other problem that is, I find the most intriguing one, is that maybe lice isn't the problem, that it's some other issue that's causing these cattle to scratch. So there's basically two types of lice that we see here in Western Canada. One is a biting louse, and the other one is a sucking louse. So they say that biting lice cause more itching than sucking lice do. That I kind of believe that, because prior to the investigations I've done with Solvet and Alberta Vet Lab, we always saw biting lice on what we called treatment failures, or application failures, where the product either was applied on not all the animals, or that had washed off, or something like that happened. Then we would see cattle scratching, and we would see biting lice. The interesting thing about the biting lice, I find, is that it doesn't respond to injectable ivermectin, because these lice feed on debris and skin secretions, and there's not enough ivermectin in those products in order to kill the louse. So you pretty well have to have contact with the ivermectin in order for it to kill the louse. Permethrin, because there's no extended effect, the permethrins don't kill the unhatched eggs, and as those eggs hatch in 7 to 10 days, you have lice infections again. So you have to treat multiple times with permethrins in order to kill biting lice. Sucking lice. So these are the ones that we see almost exclusively when we're going out to check these itchy herds. They're very small. They're considered poorly allergenic. When you're looking for them, the best place to look is around the top line. The tail head's convenient. And the other place to look, especially if you've got a heavy infestation, is around the head and the face. So they take about a month to complete their life cycle. It actually depends on the weather. So it takes longer in cold weather. You usually get the first nymph to first egg in 14 days, but it can take longer. From an egg to an egg, it can take up to a month in order to do that. Again, the ivermectin doesn't kill the unhatched eggs, but it does have an extended period of activity, so it will catch those animals those eggs that have hatched in the the first time, and then they will because they consume blood. There's ivermectin in the blood, and it will kill them. So, what are we doing to address the problem? Well, we're going out and we're looking at these. We're collecting sort of the herd history on this, and I guess the one thing when we first started is because we were used to application failures, we concentrated a lot at that. We were thinking that maybe it just wasn't going on. It wasn't going on at the right time, or it was going on when it was too cold, and the product will gel up, and it's maybe not getting to the skin before it gets knocked off. It wasn't being applied along the back line to ensure skin contact. All the animals weren't treated at the same time. And then the other thing is that lice aren't easy to see. They're very small. You need good lighting, and I need a magnifying glass. And all itchy cattle to producers have lice, and we know that that's not the case. So in any herd, you won't find lice on all the cattle, even if they're heavily infested. So you have to run a lot. You have to run a lot through, and you have to look. And even when you do find them, we know that cattle can have a heavy infestation of lice and not itch. So we're not exactly sure if those lice are the problem or not, even when we do find them. So another thing that's sort of become an issue or a concern are mange mites, and the first one is sarcoptic mange. That we rarely see anymore, but I have found that they're difficult to diagnose. You need a lot of skin scrapings in order to find them. So they are fairly rare. What is kind of come out as maybe a potential problem is coreoptic mange. They can cause severe itching, and they are very hard to diagnose. We have herds that we've gone out to investigate, and they have a mange-like pattern of hair loss, which includes around between the hind legs and sort of above the udder in that, and we scrape them and we can't find anything. Coreoptic mange mites can live off the host for a time, so they can be in the bedding. They're easy to transmit from one to the other. Coreoptic mange mites have to come in contact with the product, whether it's permethrins or ivermectins, because they consume surface skin, and they don't tend to get up to the back line where you put your pour-on products on. So we're having a closer, they've becoming a more high-ranking suspect in this itchy cow thing. Interesting, a veterinarian friend of mine who also has cattle and also experiences itchy bulls particularly, and bulls, there seems to be a sex predilection where bulls are more itchy than cattle. He took a flea comb and combed both sides of 10 bulls and sent that sample into a lab, and he came back with coreoptic mange on 7 of those. So again, we're not sure if the presence of those mange mites are causing the itching problem, but there are a couple of skin scrapings isn't likely good enough to definitively say that you don't have a mange problem. So coreoptic mange is a tough one because it can live off the animal. They're very small, they're hard to diagnose, and they're hard to treat because you have to get the product more or less in between the hind legs, and that's not easy to do on a large scale. Straw mites. So this is another kind of suspect that we've been having a look at. These are very allergenic. People that have hauled small square bales without a shirt will probably have experienced these small itchy spots all over them, and those are caused by straw mites. There seem to be more of a problem in wet years. These are really difficult to diagnose because they're in the straw, and you need a large straw sample to find, and they're really small. So we're still looking at these, but they're just so hard to find. So this is kind of my little pet area, and I'll tell you the reason for that. In the summer of 2016 and into 2000, and well, that summer, I guess, we had a horrible drought all across Western Canada, right from east of Winnipeg to north of Fort St. John. We had a terrible drought. Feed was short, pastures didn't last, and at the same time, we had a plant that produced vitamin A burned down, so there was a vitamin A shortage. And then that fall, or that winter, I guess, the January of 2017, we started to receive these complaints about itchy cattle. So the other thing, 2018 was also a dry year and feed was short, but 2018 was a better year, so 2000 as far as feed. In 2019, we didn't see the same number of complaints. So I'm very suspicious that there is a underlying nutritional component to this. Don't know what that is, but I'm suspect. On some of the herds that I have investigated that I couldn't find lice on, I did bleed those, and I did check for vitamin A and vitamin E, and it turns out that they are low or deficient in both. So don't know what that means yet, but I find that interesting. The other thing is that when these cattle, despite having been treated a number of times with different products, whether it's ivermectin, poron, or permethrins, when the grass starts to turn green out here the middle of May and they hit grass, the problem goes away. The other thing that we find interesting when we see these itchy cattle, when those cows calve, the calves aren't itchy. It's rare to find a producer that says, yes, the way I have calves losing hair too. So those are things that we have noticed. We're have got some plans to see if we can figure some of that stuff out, but those are some of the issues. Premature seasonal shedding. This happens every year, as I was saying. Sometimes we can get a very warm February, and cattle will get itchy and start to scratch. That is definitely tied to nutritional content of the feed, and it'll go away as the hair falls out. The other thing I guess I should have mentioned, and I haven't, is that on these cattle that we do go out and look at for louse problems, those cattle have very dry coats. There will be scurf that is millimeters deep all over these cattle. So that has been pretty consistent in the herds that we've looked at. Environmental hypersensitivities. So this is something that nobody knows anything about in cattle. They know lots about it in dogs, a little bit more about it in horses, but in cows, there is really nothing known about it. So I mentioned straw. There could be some feed allergies like there is in dogs, and on these dry years, we're trying to utilize all kinds of different feed sources because hay is at a premium. So that might be an issue. The parasitic allergens we mentioned in the straw mites, plant allergens, fungal allergens. Again, we're maybe using up some old feed or some old bedding. That may be a problem. How to do this? we're not really sure, again, because there's not much known about this, but what we have noticed is that people have put cattle oilers up and have just put mineral oil in them and have alleviated a lot of the problems. So again, there's something going on there that goes far beyond lice. The environmental factors, the cold, dry air out here in Western Canada, frostbite, solar hypersensitivities, those we occasionally see with cattle consuming certain types of plants that are activated by sunlight or do some liver damage that cause a secondary photosensitivity. Those are basically a separate problem. We tend to see those more, especially the solar hypersensitivities. That happens more in the spring than it does in sort of in low season in January and February. So, I guess where does that sort of leave us? Well, we have plans in place to investigate these problems. We plan on searching out these herds that do have itchy cows, looking for lice. We plan on doing some dermal testing to see if the lice actually are causing the itching or if it's something else. We plan on bleeding these cows, looking for vitamin A and vitamin E deficiencies, but we're hoping to have that ready to go for the itchy cow season this year. People have always assumed, or I guess one of the issues that I haven't touched on is ivermectin resistance. We don't know if there is ivermectin resistance in lice. It certainly could be, and it certainly could be in certain areas and in certain herds. We don't know that, but I would be surprised if there isn't some out there. But with all the things that I've mentioned, whether the dry skin, the sex predilection to bulls, the calves not being itchy, people treating them multiple times with ivermectin porons and permethrins, and the cattle are still itchy, but when they go out on green grass, the problem goes away. There's a lot more to it than just lice, and we here at Solvet and AVL intend on finding out exactly what that is. So in the meantime, you should be listening to your veterinarians as far as your parasite controls, and we are doing our best to keep them informed of our progress in our research. And with that, I am going to say that we're all done, and thank you very much for clicking in and listening.